has not happened. Why?
There has not been enough allocation of enough budget to do major projects.
Not that the money doesn't exist.
The money has been there, but very little developmental allocations.
Why?
I explained that earlier, if you can remember. The focus area, the governmental focus area has been actually three things, even if that has not been really well outlined. The first thing was, I spoke about education, where like almost 700 billion was going to, especially in the 2026 budget. Number two,
and we can't
health.
see, okay, and we can't see the results.
I know. And apparently, when it comes to government public issues, it is more about satisfaction, and it doesn't take a short time. It takes a long time. Yeah. Number two.
We could argue about that. Number two.
Number two, I spoke about health. I spoke about health. And number three, we know that there's a lot of housing development, which is a focus area for government, which cannot be ignored.
Which Kenyans are paying taxes for.
Which Kenyans are
development money set aside.
Yes, but still a lot of focus area is still on the low cost housing.
You know. Go first, just
I know he'll assist me.
Well, today, Ruth, just for your attention, the Daily Nation is talking about the crisis in education, underfunding and mismanagement of the same. The Star is talking about the crisis in the healthcare, underfunding, lack of everything from personnel, equipment, and all that. I think what you're highlighting very well is mismanagement of an economy. In my opinion, you are citing fiscal pressure, that the government is not able to raise enough revenue. It is in bad books. It cannot borrow because we have overborrowed. We are in deep, we are below, waist deep when it comes to borrowing. We're in odious debts. That's why we cannot be lent any money by IMF, World Bank, or anybody else. So the fiscal pressure is what you're citing as you're trying to defend that position, which I appreciate. But again, we need to be very realistic. I think there's something called strategic importance. And that's why most of these utilities, they're managed by the state. When you talk of telecoms, when you talk of the energy. So when we have narrowed down as a country to a point where we cannot borrow anymore because we have overborrowed. Most of them is odious, which is illegal. It's a criminality the government has committed. The monies you're saying have been allocated to the ministries and the sectors, education, health. They are non-existent in terms of, if we had good education system, we would agree, then perhaps we need to sell so we can do what needs to be done again. The housing you're talking about, people raise money to build those houses. So the government does not chip any single coin. Actually, they divert the contribution because, in a year, they collect about 100 billion. But what they have utilized now is less than 20 billion in the units that they have completed. They have invested that money illegally. So the question is, how do we justify the economic crisis we are in, and again say that we can offset, offload the few profitable parastatals we have? And then the question would be, second question for me is that Kenya will not always be in an economic crisis. When we rise to normalcy, when we come back to, the equilibrium, are we able to recover these parastatals to state management?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Maybe you want to add?
Maybe Ken will help after I start to ask this question.
Yeah. So we talk about KPC, and you look at the importance of KPC in terms of the movement of the asset that it does carry. And one would say there is no country in the world that does not depend on energy. Right? So you look at even the fight today between US and Venezuela, it's on oil. And you go to the US, one of the biggest reserves that the country takes care of is the oil reserves in the country. Go to Russia, Ukraine war. The first thing that Ukraine hit in Russia was the Russian oil reserves, because you hit that and the economy of the country comes to a standstill. Go to Africa, South Africa, and the oil reserves. Everybody seems to be having that. In Kenya, we have a resource that is KPC, that is, first of all, operating on profit. It is giving us an opportunity for us to take care of our economy, but we look at a situation where, as much as it's giving us the profit, one would ask the question, with all the profit that KPC has given to the government of Kenya, what has that money been used to do for us to say that we just need to get rid of this and use this money for development? Because expenditure is our biggest problem in the country. Expenditure, mismanagement, and corruption is our problem. We seal all those loopholes, and we're good. We're losing 3 billion shillings a day. 3 billion shillings a day. If we recover all that, we don't need to sell KPC. I mean,
in a month, you have the 100 billion you're looking for.
You have the 100 billion you're looking for, which goes to say that the sale of KPC is ill-advised. It is a way to tell Kenyans we'll get 100 billion at a go, but not look at the bigger picture on where the problem is at. That's how I would look at it, perhaps. I don't know.
And I think, Aseto, I would not have put it any better. When you talk about a country's security or a country's sovereignty, there are 4 pillars of sovereignty. Number 1 is what you said, energy, security. Number 2 is food security. You know, he who feeds you controls you. Number 3 is your monetary. And that's why I was very upset with the issue of M-Pesa as part of Safaricom sale being offloaded, because now you have people sitting in South Africa who can make a decision on your M-Pesa and what can and cannot happen. And number 4, it's your military. These 4 aspects cannot be outsourced, no matter what argument of profitability, because there are elements of national security. I mean, you go back to Europe, you mentioned Europe, there was a Nord Stream pipeline that was going from Russia to Germany, and it was really invested. It was supposed to be pitched as the best infrastructure project. But now when Russia went the direction they did, you know, all the Western European countries, not least Germany, were put up in a very difficult situation, because now that is your source of your energy. I think the blessing we have had in Kenya is we've never really been at war, literally, since 1963. We've never really been at war. So we never really think of issues of security per se. And that's why we always talk about profitability. Is it profitable to sell Safaricom? Because we've never really been at war. But think of, in the event things don't go well with your neighbors, that infrastructure, that oil infrastructure, if somebody says, actually, a group of businessmen sitting in London say, actually, we want to determine how much oil will be passing through, that can easily collapse a country. So I think the benefit, we've never really been at war. It means we never think of matters of war and peace, because we've never really been there. But talk about the countries we've talked about. Energy is at the heart of decisions. If Germany was to vote again on the issue of Nord Stream, I'm sure they would say, no, thank you. We want to have our own resources. So I think it's something we have to think about, especially given the peacetime we've enjoyed, that we don't think hard about that. And it's, in a way, it's a blessing, but it can also make you a bit naive about the decisions moving forward.
Right. Should there be some kind of, and this is a question for both of you, you can start with you, Ken, should there be some kind of traceability factor when we see, because look, for all intents and purposes, if the National Assembly has already gone ahead and assented to level 1 of this, the likelihood of us seeing the divestiture of KPC is a reality. It's going to happen. So we can't be talking about it should or it shouldn't. It's going to happen, because now where we are is moving forward. Should there be traceability in terms of a factor, in terms of what happens with this money? Because it is public money. What is being sold, what is being divested is the government stake in this company. And that is public money. It's money that's made from taxes, that's gotten largely from taxes. So if you then sell stake, the money that is retrieved from it, we should be able to account for every penny of it, and we should actually be able to trace where it goes and what it goes towards. Whether it's going to go into this kitty. Remember, there's a kitty, 5 trillion shilling kitty that is being investment fund. Thank you. And this money from the divestiture of companies such as this goes into that kitty, and there's going to be a company that's going to be formed. There'll be a CEO and all of these people who will then govern and administer over these funds. Should we then not be able to see, as a result of that, where every penny goes and what it goes towards? Ruth tells us that there's been no development in Kenya for the last 3 years. I'm really afraid then, if you are going to have a 5 trillion shilling investment fund, if no development has happened in 3 years, what's the guarantee that in the next 2 years, any development will occur? Ken?
That's a powerful point. The proceeds of the sale of these assets should go back to where I began this conversation, to providing the public goods, because that's why countries exist. So it should not be just on infrastructure. Yeah, infrastructure is one component, but part of it should be on national defense. We still have parts of this country where banditry is still, people cannot do business, people cannot go to school.
Yesterday, people are crying about the fact that they can't send their children back to school because there are bandits running amok in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
That's true. So you need to be able to expand your security infrastructure so the whole country is safe. You have to have access to justice, law and order. The judiciary continuously tells us that they're underfunded. So many cases are stuck in courts because of backlogs. So the sale has to go back to providing public. It cannot just be contained within an infrastructure fund. Infrastructure is just one part of providing public. There are many other things. And you talked about education, you talked about healthcare. It has to be able to address the issues. Otherwise, Kenyans start misunderstanding why are we doing this in the first place if our lives are not getting
any better.
Any better. Yeah.
And from a constitutional point of view, these parastatals are owned by the state, means they're owned by the people because they were raised and built up by our taxes. So today, in my opinion, anything that we sell that belongs to the people needs to go to the people's account, the consolidated fund. And I don't know whether the setting up of the infrastructure fund builds up a parallel budgeting for development, which I think is illegal. But now I would ask, how then do we justify that we want to sell KPC or any other, Safaricom and the rest, so that we can build roads? Isn't that an illegality by itself in terms of finances? Should the money go back to the consolidated fund and then it is allocated from that point to, as you say, maybe to defense, to judiciary and any other any other of our components?
Thank you. I like both of your questions, and I'll go back to your earlier one when we go to both education, the health, and also the buildings and affordable housing. So one of the things that we don't speak loudly in this country is the issue of corruption, and the fact that corruption is really budgeted. So what we saw or what we've seen previously, especially in the education system and also in SHA, is what is causing a lot of problem because there's a lot of spillage in the money. We know it was all written in the newspapers, how non-existent schools were funded, and how existent schools were not funded, and there's a lot of that. We saw even an MP, I think in yesterday's newspaper, saying if they do not receive their capitation by a certain time, they mobilize the parents to ensure that parents can start funding school, because education is something also that cannot be compromised. And one of the things that this government needs to deal with head on is the issue of corruption, because corruption, no responsibility has ever been taken to anyone when it comes to corruption. And that is the elephant in the room. This country has enough resources to ensure that everyone is secure. And this country, actually, the reason why I'm supporting this whole issue about KPC is because there's no way we can ignore the private sector contribution in this economy. 80% of the contribution and even spurring economic growth in this country happens through the private sector. When we look even from the reason why the government normally sells some of these institutions is just to bring in better management, even accountability. If you all can agree that previously, especially when it comes to all issue budgets, there has not been accountability. Why were Gen Zs going to riot and bring all these issues? They were all looking for accountability, and that is what we are lacking as a people. So selling of KPC is not the big deal or big issue. When we go to the investment fund now, that is where the big issue is. Is the money going to do the things that it was made to do? Because by the time the bill is going through the parliament, you can be sure even public participation, happened or not happened or perceived to have happened, has been done somewhere, So,
and that's the thing.
Yeah.
To an extent, and I think that's where it's all hidden in plain sight. So we're going to have a conversation about whether the private sector can actually handle the operations of KPC. And I don't think that's the issue. What is being hidden here is what is going to happen with the funds that come from the sale or the partial divestiture of this company? We have seen that the private sector continues to thrive. That is why we have seen the mushrooming of private schools. That's why we saw the mushrooming of private hospitals. That's why we see the mushrooming of, in other countries, private energy suppliers, Nigeria, for example, who've done a better job than the national power providing company. In South Africa, the same thing. The private sector continuously does a better job than the public sector. The economy of nations like the US itself is run on private companies. Take your pick. But in this case, it is not that somebody will come in and handle the operations of KPC. It is that 100 billion shillings that you are going to get from the sale of this organization partially, what is going to be done with it? And why should this money go towards this, what did you call it?
Infrastructure fund.
Thank you. Instead of the consolidated fund. Is that not where the fine print then comes in, Ken?
I think there's something we need to clarify, and I think many Kenyans still might not appreciate it. These funds that are being put in the infrastructure fund, they will not really be going to build infrastructure. Because remember what the president said at the State of the Nation address, for every shilling that is put in the infrastructure fund, 10 shillings will be put by pension funds into that fund. So it's really the pension funds that will be building the infrastructure. And the same goes for the affordable housing. It's not really your deductions that are building the houses. It's a fund to help de-risk the sector. It will be actually pension funds building these and other capital holders building the houses. And if they do not get offtake, then this is the money that they'll use. It's more of a backup to these things. So the question somebody might ask is, why is it that these entities find it so risky to put in money themselves that there has to be a fund to be able to do? What is it about doing business in Kenya that, because many Kenyans build houses and they sell them.
Yes.
Why do you feel that you need a special fund to build a lot of houses? Why? Because it means that doing business in Kenya is very risky. So I think that's the underlying factor they should actually be looking at. Why is it that so many investors want to put in money in your infrastructure, in your Mau Summit Road? That road, the traffic on that road should be able to pay you back. So why do investors insist on having a separate fund to be able to de-risk it? It means the aspects of doing business in Kenya, the appearance of doing business in Kenya, to many investors, Kenya still remains a very risky place to be.
So isn't that what government ought to be fighting to fix? Because the role of government is to provide a conducive environment through which business can be operated, leading towards economic development.
Absolutely, and that's why I said at the very beginning, we need to look at the public goods. One of the public goods is law and order. If a company knows they can go to court and be able to get a ruling in their favor, then they'll say, okay, then the cost of doing business is not risky. If something that does not happen my way, I can go to court and be, and so I don't need to put so much money. So I think, absolutely to your point, is we are not looking at the fundamental point of people look at doing business in Kenya as risky, and before they commit their own, pension money is very sacrosanct. This is workers' money that has been saved over many years. So any responsible fund manager, before they put in money into the Mau Summit, like NSSF is putting in, they have to be absolutely sure that they will not lose money. And that's why they insisted on this fund. And the reason they can't touch the consolidated fund is that is where all money for government debt, the consolidated fund has funds for paying all creditors, and critical expenditures are paid through the consolidated fund. So it's impossible. It's very difficult to touch, and that's why they felt they had to create that alternative fund. But it goes back to the issue of doing business in Kenya. How come in the past, many people, if you go back to 20 years, people used to invest in these things without asking for de-riskment, and why is it now that everybody needs And that's what we need to do. It means our court systems, and people don't feel like if they go to court, if the government does not approve in their way, they will not be able to get there. And you've already seen stories in the papers where I don't know which entity has gone to court and they will not be able to get how much they invested back. That's one of the issues. So I think that's the fundamental thing. How do we make the business of Kenya so attractive that people do not need?
You see,
Is the diversion from the consolidated fund the step away to set up an alternative in terms of the best practice in finance management of an economy? Is that appropriate? Is it a best practice standard?
I know it's very, let's go back to the fund managers, the pension funds. The total pension holding in Kenya is in the trillions.
Yes.
Most of this money is sitting in government bonds. That's like the number one asset class.
Yes.
And government bonds are paid back through the consolidated fund.
Yeah.
So there's no bondholder in this country who'd want that fund to be touched. In fact, it would make the risk profile of Kenya
Very high.
all your euro bonds.
Yes.
So that's why, in as much as they're trying to say it may take a long time, that they know the difficulty of touching. You actually have to talk to all the bondholders and say, do you guys agree that there'll be another avenue of money? And they'll say no, because that is where they get their revenue. So it tells you, first of all, it's a narrative of our debt situation, that we have so much debt that you touch that fund, our interest rates will just rise overnight. But again, you go back to the fund managers again and ask, I think we have, in economics, is a problem what's called the excess capital. This is something even Marx had even talked about, how capital accumulation becomes so much and it can actually destroy a society itself. If you look at how much savings we have, NSSF, all the fund managers, they've already utilized the different asset classes. They put money in government bonds, they put money in equities,
housing and all
in
that.
real estate. But the problem with real estate, it's not very liquid. So if your pensioners, and your pensioners need monthly payments, and real estate can take time to sell.
Yeah.
Government bonds also, there's a maximum you cannot exceed. So the new avenue is infrastructure. And that's where they're trying to put money in infrastructure to be able to diversify. But the question is, is it the priority for the country? Back to your question of education and healthcare. Is that the priority?
I mean, you see, we talk about the cost of doing business in the country, right? So you look at our taxation regime, which is not predictable. So businesses would never think of coming to invest in Kenya because the next 2-3 years, we're not sure if the taxes will favor us or not. We also look at, let's look at even KPC and the profits that it made in the past 3 years. We're talking about that is 9.7 billion shillings. And anyone would ask, are we able to trace what this 39.7 billion shillings has done to the economy that would make us say that we wanted to sell KPC? And it's an emphatic, no, we cannot trace where that money has gone to because there is corruption in the country. We talk about a taxation regime that does not inspire confidence for investors to come invest into the country, which then goes further to explain that if we go back to the basics and fix what we need to fix, get rid of corruption, that we need to have a taxation regime that would encourage investors to come into the country, that we would not struggle to raise 100 billion shillings that we're now selling KPC for, that through taxes that investors would be paying the government of Kenya, we are able to move and able to put our priorities where they ought to be. So the problem is not, so the issue here is not selling KPC to get funds. It is us fixing our policies, us fixing our taxation regimes, us looking at our expenditure. Some ministries here are spending millions on chai and mandazi. Let's close all those bolts and nuts and ensure that the country is headed the right direction by doing things right. Even if we decide to sell KPC, but we've not gotten rid of the mess, the 100 billion shillings will disappear.
And as you answer that, I just want to ask a simple mathematical question here. How much did we say is being collected by our taxes on the housing, affordable housing?
100 billion.
100 billion a year?
Yeah.
So far, just under 2,000 units countrywide. I think that's even impressive. We're probably around 1,600 units have been constructed around the country, right? Yes? No. Okay. From estimates that we've seen coming out of that particular State Department, it costs about 3 million shillings to develop a two-bedroom apartment unit. And that's the basic. We're saying 2 million, two bedroom. There are some that are 1 bedroom. There are some that are 3 bedroom, few, but most of them are in the 2-bedroom area. It costs 3 million shillings to do one. If we have done 2,000 around the country, that is 6 billion shillings. 6 billion. And we've not crossed 2,000. So where does the money go?
Good question. First, I want to agree with him, like in totality. Our policies are wrong in so many ways. And even the process of taking policies into law takes a lot of time. And also, the ones that the government wants to favor, they go through very fast. And that is one of the major issues that we have to deal with as a country. And that enables something called equality. And especially, we just saw, I think last week, there are many companies that are withdrawing out of Kenya because it's so hard to do business in Kenya. So the ease of doing business has continued for very long to be very difficult. However, the reason why I like your point a lot is because of, if you look at both of them, especially in the balancing of the fiscal policy, there's a lot of win-win, especially even with this infrastructure fund, because the government is trying not to come back into our pocket like it did a few years ago, because it doesn't want to grapple with the issues of tax issues that citizens are already so much aware. And that is why other bills are being passed around, the finance bill. And there's a win-win. So they're looking at how are we going to do this without coming back to your pocket, and raising a lot of questions. So in terms of balancing the tax policy, even for the last 3 years, I can say from where I sit, it's really balanced. Why not only for 2023, 2024, where the fund, the housing levy was introduced. I think after that, not a lot of it has been done, and that is why the government is trying to balance both the interest, the forex, just to ensure that it balances and it can be able to get more income from other sources. Even as we continue and as we argue about the whole issue of KPC, we can stand here and say that the government is owning a lot of many other resources, and maybe even before the introduction of the KPC, there were others that had been introduced, if you can remember 2 years ago, the likes of KICC and the sort, So maybe we can say this has a lot of interest, especially by the public uproar and all that, but it's something that is continued. Yeah. The only thing I can say, accountability is not clear, and that is where the spillage is. But if things can be done in the goodwill of this country, and I'm not standing here defending the government. I have nothing to stand, but I like balancing and seeing the common good, the general good for not only now but the future. How then does it ensure that the countries continue standing like he was saying, especially when it comes to ensure that the bonds and everything is secure enough to secure the country like it has been, to something in the foreseeable future, all that has to be balanced. When it comes to the accountability that has been asked about the 2,000 units that have been built out of the 3 million and is coming to around 6 billion, I do not want to say because I cannot, I'm not in that housing levy fund, but what I can say maybe, there's a lot of incompletion that is happening maybe throughout the country. If you move around this city alone or environ, you see all this incomplete infrastructure all over. The question now we should be asking is the accountability question. Until when? How long is it going to take? How much has been invested? What is work in progress? The certificate, what is the certificate level, especially for the building, that is the buildings that are all coming up. And that way we balance. The reason why I'm saying that is because we only have this country, and I like saying that question or repeating that issue again. We only have this country, and we have to be balanced both ways and say, yes, the government, like she has said, like the government, we are not going to stop right now the issue that is in the National Assembly. How can we be able to follow through it positively and ensure and ask for accountability. Where is the money going to go? Who is going to be managing? When the whole, like I can ask a whole question to the four of us. How do we know whether KPC has been operating optimally, even with those 36 billion that you're speaking about? How can we stand? Is there a higher optimal level that maybe has been discussed or foreseen or due diligence has been done and it can operate to a higher capacity and maybe take oil even further, maybe not only Uganda, to other countries? These are the critical questions that we should ask.
Well, Ruth, I admire your optimism, and I hope we can all rally behind that and convert that to actionable point. However, I think the concern is not just the sale of the KPC or Safaricom. It is the mismanagement of our economic situation. And you realize also, everybody talks about the priorities, that this regime has the priorities inverted. We should not be building houses, in my opinion. We should be building schools. That way, we will not be having a crisis of placing grade 10s a county away for a day school. We will not be having a crisis of not having enough equipment in the hospitals. So then, if we had our priorities correct, we'd perhaps front an argument and say, now we can move to privatization because we have met the basics. The public policy is working for the public. Therefore, for us to accelerate, because I agree we need to move to pace up in terms of development, we can move to privatization. But once we don't have confidence, one, in how we are managing our economy today, the odious debt situation, we've never had a public audit of our debt. It has never been publicized. Every regime comes and says we will do it. It has not happened. The CS Finance has not provided that, but they are pushing privatization. It is upon the government that perhaps you feel sorry for to come out and inspire confidence. Let us know this is the situation we are in and this is why we need to do this. Otherwise, where we stand today, in my opinion, this privatization is just going to be another project. We'll be saying we should not have done it 3 months, 6 months later. I don't know how you feel about that, Ken.
I completely agree with you. We have a confidence crisis, and that's coming from a trust deficit.
Right.
Investors love Kenya. They want to invest in Kenya, but they don't feel they have enough trust and confidence. We've just come from laying our brother Cyrus Jirongo a few weeks ago, and he was one of the first proponents of the NSSF Nyayo Estate, not too far from here.
Yeah.
So this was in the early 90s, this was like 35 years ago. So if a big pension fund like NSSF had all the confidence to put up all those housing units, which were all taken because the demographics make sense. We have a big housing deficit. So even if you do a feasibility study, it tells you there's a big deficit, you need houses. Why is it that people need additional security? That now you have to start deducting money in the name of an affordable housing fund to even give them more confidence? The numbers alone should, and then the safe houses were all taken. I think it's one of the most successful projects without any deductions, because people believed, the demographics, it made sense. So how is it that people can do a feasibility study, they say it makes sense, but they still ask government for additional security? Because what we are contributing there is really security. It's not money that we'll be building. It's more of an insurance that in case those houses are not taken up, then the government. But why do people need that in the first place if the numbers make sense? It tells you we have a major trust deficit, major confidence crisis, that even the most obvious projects that could be done by anybody with zero insurance now require some special fund to guarantee. I think that's the fundamental thing we need to go back and reflect. How did we get to a place where trust deficit became so big
that these things are being done and that these houses are actually being constructed, or that what is going to happen with monies that come from sale or divestiture of public organizations in whatever way is not the issue. That folks are now asking the questions, that what is going to happen and what did happen to public trust, that there is a deficit, there is distrust, and it has come from mistrust, and it has all come from a lived experience, that what happens with monies that are of a public nature. And so these are the questions that we must continue asking. We must continue having these conversations. And that's why we do that, for us to be plugged into this discourse. Ken Gishing and Ruth Kenyanjui, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Of course, we continue these conversations, but thanks for being in the hot seat this morning.
Thank you.
Santi
Thank you.
They'll continue. It's 8:01. Good morning.
This is the